You handled a number of deaths in succession that happened over the last 3 years.
Death doesn't have to be all sorrow.
So you see death, especially death that happens after a life well lived, as a very joyful experience.
I'm gonna sit and I'm gonna let this grief wave wash over me and I'm just gonna let go.
How did it affect your emotional state to be doing that?
One of the things I've learned about myself is that when there is trauma, when there's sorrow, sadness, intensity, I lean in.
Welcome to Unexpected Happiness. I'm your host, Ariel Steele. If your life looks good on paper, but something still feels off inside, you're not alone. This podcast is about finding real happiness in the middle of real life, especially when things don't go as planned.
So one of the things we wanted to talk about today, which I think is really remarkable, is how you handled a number of deaths in succession that happened over the last 3 years.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is that the first one was the most tragic one, and it was there was another surprising one, but this one was like shocking because it was a suicide. My reaction was, the other ones I was very steady through and I wasn't suppressing. My reaction was different, but it was about 45 minutes, an hour of me having a very emotional processing. It was like opening this floodgate of like, okay, here we go. And then when the others came over the next few years, they were more measured. Of course, they weren't a suicide. Suicide is horrible. It's like there's death and then there's death by suicide.
There's another element when there's a suicide.
That's what I mean.
What was it about the suicide in particular that hit you hard?
It just come from the conference while we were at the building still. And I remember I saw that my phone had been silenced and I had all these phone calls. And so I called my husband who had been trying to reach me, and I was walking into the bathroom. I was going to go wash my hands off. I remember this very clearly, and going to the sink and seeing the soap, and you just see all these things of like where you were. And I remember I instantly thought of Karen, his mom, who had already lost a husband about 35 years before to a very tragic boating accident that she was there for. So I know she's had that trauma. So I instantly was crying because of her.
Yeah.
It was because of her. And I was just like, oh my God, I cannot believe she has to go through this again. From that moment on, I never had a reaction that took me out of my control after that. And I'm not saying that in a way that I seek that, but where, gosh, because
we all do a little bit, right? I mean, doesn't everyone want to have a little bit of control in their lives?
a little bit, right? And I mean, it's not like, when I lost my dad, I'm gonna skip ahead a little bit. Like I absolutely had moments where then I would just like let myself cry. And I guess that's different, right? What I'm thinking, that's like grief. Like I'm going to sit and I'm going to let this grief wave wash over me and I'm just going to let go. That I'm just thinking is compared to learning about Chuck and I, that was different. It was very interesting.
So tell me how that was so different.
It was surprise. I was totally surprised.
He had some health things going on. Do you want to talk a little bit about why he might have chosen to do that?
He was an athlete his whole life, and that was his main identification. Those are the stories that would come up about his, and he was still a track coach and javelin thrower in particular. And that was so much so we joked about like the fact that Chuck found a new person to talk to. He's talking about his javelin throwing, And he also then prided himself on being able to physically do things. And his hobby was buying a lot of real estate, turning them around and renting them out. And that was a lot of their income. And then he got to where he was in his 80s and he had tremors and he was moving slower and he was physically really slowing down. Strangely enough, he had told people, like Chad had heard it. I think Karen had heard it before too. And other people, he would say like, when I get to where I am physically, weak and someone might need to take care of me, I'm just going to kill myself. What surprised me wasn't like, oh, I can't believe Chuck did that. Like I could never, it was like right away, I'm like, okay, yeah, that fits for him, right? Like he was depressed. We would go visit and he would disappear in his room for a couple of days. Like Karen told us also with all these behaviors he had, he was depressed and we knew that. And he was complicated and he held us here. So we held him there. And, and my reaction was also never of a deep, deep love and grief myself. It was also for my children who loved him as a grandfather. And, I did love him, but, we didn't have a close connection because he did hold us afar. So it was the surprise, it was the action and the learning about it in that moment, right?
Yeah. So this has happened, you find out, and then a very strong reaction in the beginning,
Yeah.
of course. And what happened after that? Like, how did you handle things, and how did the people around you handle them?
So one of the things I've learned about myself is that when there is trauma, when there's sorrow, sadness, intensity, I lean in. So we went out for a couple of weeks and just immediately dropped everything. And we were able to do that, took the kids out of school and, just did some remote schooling and stayed there for 2 weeks that time. And then Chad and I would take turns and go back frequently. I remember being there at some point without my family, and it might have been in the very beginning or at the end. I don't recall exactly, but I remember bringing her coffee in the morning, and she was in bed, and it was only like a few days later. And she sat up and was like, I am so thankful you're here. She just took the coffee and she's like, I wouldn't even know to do this.
And so did that bring you comfort to be able to be useful in this situation? Or how did it affect your emotional state to be doing that?
It's funny. What I'm tripping on right now is the comfort comment. And I never saw that I needed comfort.
Okay. Because you weren't experiencing as much personal grief in that situation as
Right.
maybe in some others that you had later.
It's very interesting. I had moments of being like, oh, Chuck, but for the most part, I didn't have that connection with him. So I wouldn't define it. Sure. I'm not going to say like I didn't need comfort, but that wasn't my thing that I needed. It was me needing to be there for others, like for my children who felt the loss of a grandfather and they never saw his flaws. That's the beauty of children, right? They can see and love past all of that. And for her, who'd already been through so much in life, and then knowing how that was going to change her life, and then seeing Chad, who was very burdened by the results of what came from that. And so I think I just saw what I could easily do and the vast impact it would have
on all the people you love.
Yeah. Yeah. It's easy when it's something, when you have a talent and it comes to you easily and it brings you somehow a happiness and it brings others even more, so much so they can't they almost don't know how to thank you. But it's like,
but it's easy for you.
You're just like, yeah, so it's not like you had to work hard to create this thing and, have it happen. You're just like, no, I know what to do. Right.
That's when we're in flow, when you get to do what really makes you happy and it brings joy to everyone else or at least to someone else.
And relief, right? At least. And so therein lies the joy.
Then. Yeah. That was important.
Yeah. And I think also and then this is also just a characteristic of, whatever it is, I can get shit done. I'm very organized. I'm very practical. I can be like, XYZ needs to happen and I can move fast. I'm like, okay, we're going to box this up. We're going to get it out of here. And I'm just thinking like his closet, it's so funny.
Things that would have been so hard for her to do.
Yes. She didn't want to touch some things, but she wanted it done. I'm like, I can do that. And then, 2 hours later, it's taken care of.
Yeah. So that was a real comfort to her. What did you see in her that maybe helped her, maybe hindered her in her emotional journey through this?
I think both help and hinder. She kind of blocks it out. Is trying to recognize that that's what she does, but she has not uncovered that yet. It's part of how she's dealt. She's like the peacekeeper. Oh, it's fine. I'll be all right. I don't care. And do you? And I challenge her a lot with that. This happens and they yelled and they got upset, but I don't care. Do you though? Do you care? Or is that just because you put a wall up to protect yourself and so you can't feel that? So,
well, it's such an interesting concept. And I'm reading a book right now called Bittersweet. And it's by the author who wrote the book Quiet that you recommended to me. And she talks about how our society wants people to be happy all the time. And, that's not my goal in having this podcast is for people to just be happy, 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 and to be happy when something sad happens. I want people to feel all their emotions. So it's interesting to think about how some people will put up a wall. Maybe society makes them feel like they have to, but there's such a tension between being, not feeling when you have a negative emotion that needs to be felt, and not suffering by staying in it too long.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious if there's anything in that you have some insights on.
And I'm not saying that, there are some people who truly will get sucked down into the hole of darkness. So, and I'm not a therapist, right? I don't have, I don't know. So I can't speak to that, but I can speak to what I've experienced. And that is that by letting those very deep, sorrowful, grieving moments hit you, and by letting it just embrace you, the more you do that, the more you come out of the wave, and then you surface, I mean, that's the only way I can describe it. And I think I got to witness this in my early 20s when a good friend of mine had lost his girlfriend in a very tragic murder.
Okay.
Yeah, in Yosemite. And he is such a light and joy. And I'd met him, before she had died. And I remember his energy and everything. I remember thinking just what a wonderful human he was and is. And then her death happened while I was away. When I came back and got to really know him, he became a close friend. I still saw that light. So that was interesting. And I still saw his beauty. And we were all very close. I was close with all his friends. And so we would spend a lot of time together. And he showed me inadvertently how to grieve. It was unbelievable. And I was so thankful for that lesson, because we would just be doing whatever. I mean, it was freaking tragic. His girlfriend was brutally murdered by a serial killer. And Joey Armstrong, Yosemite, Carrie Stainer, the murderer, if anybody wanted to go look into that was her. And it's an amazing story too, because she's a warrior and kicked his ass, which is why there was so much evidence left that he was found, and now he's forever in prison. So it was great in that way. Talk about a heaviness, right? A real darkness. And Michael would, that's my friend's name. He would we'd be having dinner or something, and we lived in this beautiful national park. Maybe we were sitting at the picnic table and we're all just enjoying the beauty of the outside. And then something would happen. Maybe we'd start talking about something. Maybe he'd see something. I don't even know. And he would just sit and just let it roll. And he would just cry and just kind of fold over. And he was perfectly fine and welcoming of any of us coming and just quietly putting an arm around him or something. And he didn't want to push us away. He just wanted to be with us all. And it was very normalized. Everybody was we never had to talk about it. It was sometimes it would just be a few people sitting with him or one person, and then maybe others would be running around laughing still. And this would happen, over the course of the next year. And I was living in a house with some roommates where he would come back often, and he would go off on adventures and just trying to work through the trauma he'd experienced, and he'd come back and land with us and stay with us for many days. And I loved that. And it was beautiful to watch that. And he would come out of it and he'd wipe the tears, and then we would just all have something else we were doing, and he would be joyful. And I remember him talking about it too, with you have to let the grief, when the grief comes, you have to let it in. You have to. So he was my shining example of that.
Wow. So Chuck's suicide happened, and then there was another death that Karen had to experience really close in time after that. Tell me about that experience, because it was really a profound experience for you as well.
Yeah.
It happened.
Yeah, so she just had her 100th birthday, and then a bunch of us came together for it. And then a week later, Chuck took his life. So,
oh, wow. I didn't realize how close in time those two happened.
Yeah. Yeah. And B was absolutely slowing down. She was in an assisted living home, and it was clear that she was probably in her last year.
I mean, at 100, we're kind of expecting this any day.
Exactly. And so in that way, B had lived a very full, wonderful life, and she was ready. She talked about it often. She's like, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to die. So yeah, it was very different in that way, but also then a lot, because these are the two people who had anchored Karen to where she lived. Her mom had lived not even a mile away, and she saw her every day. And Obviously she shared a home with Chuck. And so within like 3 months, she lost both these people. So even though B's loss was more, in time, in order, like it was still a lot for her, right? Yeah, that was interesting. So Karen had been out here when we got the call from her assisted living home that she was, that hospice had been called in. So I flew back with her.
Okay.
And just because I just figured she just needed somebody there with her, and we went and we were able to.
After Chuck's suicide was this happening? Was this
3 months?
3 months.
3 months.
Okay, so
Yeah.
it's very raw still.
Yes. And we got to the assisted living home, and that late afternoon, early evening, and I remember she was barely aware. I was able to whisper in her ear that her family was here, and she giggled like her familiar giggle, and her eyes would open just a little, but she was going into her deeper death coma. And we went home. I think we might have gone home that night because of where she was at. We're like, okay, she's dying, but we can go home, get some good rest, and we'll come back in the morning. And I remember being like, okay, this is great. We're going to be with her. I'm so happy that family's going to be sitting with her, because they were going to have someone from the home sit with her. And we're like, no, we got this. Yeah. So we show up, and I remember Karen was like, okay, we got there in the morning and spent like an hour. And she's like, okay, well, I guess we could go and do whatever and come back. I'm like, oh, no, we're sitting vigil. Like it was like, no, we're staying right here. And so we were there the whole day, and it was so good because I've never done that, but I was like, oh, I can't, like I told you, I lean in. I'm like, oh, I can't wait. Oh, this is going to be amazing. We get to be with B while she dies. it was like almost joyful, because she wanted it.
I want to talk about that for a moment, because that is not the reaction that our society has to death.
Which is so crazy.
I'm going to jump in for just a quick second. I want to share a playful tool I developed just for you. Are you unable to enjoy the special moments you create as much as you'd like? Do you sometimes feel like you aren't as happy as you think you should be? If so, the simple 5-minute quiz will help you discover the pattern that's blocking you from the freedom and peace that you deserve. I also give you one simple practice you can start using today. Once you know what holds you back, you can be on the path to feeling better in your everyday life, moment to moment. The quiz is available at unexpectedhappiness.net/quiz.
I'd love to hear your thoughts on how society views death and your view of death, because, I think there's some really healthy ways that you look at death that we could all learn from.
Yeah. Well, and I wasn't brought up, I was technically Christian, and baptized, but didn't go to church much. My family, my mom and dad they weren't truly religious. And so I wasn't brought up with that, strict doctrine of like, there is a God, and then when you die, you go to, like, it was kind of talked about more like in theory. And so when I was a young adult, I remember kind of questioning it and being like, what is this God thing? And I would say as I grew older and today I can say I am deeply, deeply spiritual. If I'd been in a family that went to church, I'm sure I would have been like, hell yeah, because it's all the same. You're all just recognizing a higher power and a life beyond this plane of existence. And I am 100%. I know that, I trust that. And I also am pretty sensitive and feel energy, feel spirits. Like I've had experiences that have like, absolutely there is life after death, and before, and there's a whole nother plane. People don't go far when they die, and they wait for us. And so I've just like developed this in my life. And I think that gave me comfort too. And also just knowing like, oh, her death angels are coming, her ancestors, her husband, like they're coming, like they're here. Like I had that. It's not like she was just floating off into nothing to dissolve, like into the wind, So I had that as well. That's part of my belief system. And
so you see death, especially death that happens after a life well lived, as a very joyful experience, like other cultures.
Yes.
And so how do you see the U.S. society view of death and how it contrasts?
Well, I mean, people don't talk about it,
right?
Because they weren't taught to talk about it, and so therefore they fear it and they don't understand it. And when it happens, they don't know what to do with it, and most people will turn away and they'll just be fearful.
Yeah,
I'm seeing that with some friends in my life right now who are looking at some loss coming up, and they're don't really know, they're not talking about it. And I was just visiting with them. I'm like, you all have to talk about this.
Yeah.
This is okay.
You're at the hospice and you're like, we're going to sit vigil and we're going to get to.
Well, actually, we were in her room even, like, because, so it was where she lived for the last 10 years, which is awesome. You know, hospice had been called in. And then they,
so she got to be exactly where she's been comfortable.
Yeah. Yep. And then just the staff was just kind of, you know, they'd come and check now and then, and they were there if we needed them, but they know this drill. It's a senior home. And so they were able to give us just enough support and let us be. And it's so funny. I remember that day. So I was like, Karen, we're sitting. She's like, oh, okay. You know, and she's so lovely and just will go with the flow. And and so I started Googling on my phone. I'm like, let's read about death.
Who does that?
Because I was like, this is fascinating. So what's happening? And so we got all the high points.
What were your Google queries?
It was like, it was like the process of death, what to expect in the last, you know, when someone's dying. And then you kind of get down to, then it was like, holy crap, this could take weeks. And so, just reading about like what happens to your body, and then, you know, how you eventually then get the death rattle, and that your mouth gets dry, and but you can, people say you can still hear, you can definitely feel, you can, so we were doing, I was like, great, they say she can feel. So I got the lotion, we were rubbing it on her hands and her arms and her feet. And mostly I was doing that, and had music, and we would put, like, Willie Nelson was one of her favorites. We'd put it on the pillow by her head, and she would kind of groan and respond a little bit. And I remember Karen a couple times was like, oh, well, that might be making her uncomfortable. I'm like, nothing is making her uncomfortable right now. She's dying. And that helped to ground it too, to be like, oh, this is what happens to the body. When the body's done, because it's old and you used it really well and the spirit's ready to move on, you know what happens. So then we got to the place where she was definitely had the death rattle, you know, that went on for where you just, you know, the muscles are starting to relax so much so that you're getting this sound in the throat. And so I knew we were near. And then it'll tell you something like, death is within, you know, so many hours to like 12 hours. You're like, oh my God. So Karen's like, all right, I'm going back to the house. I'm like, do you want me to go? She's like, no, I'll go. I'm going to get this and this for us, provisions. And so I was like, okay, well, I'll stay here. And secretly, I was actually really happy because I wanted to have a moment with B to talk to her and connect with her in a way that I couldn't do with someone else present. And the way that I didn't know I could or even needed to. But I just felt like, this is good. I'll have some time to be alone with her and just let my freak flag fly, you know? And so Karen left, and she was gone for all of like maybe 20 minutes, you know, maybe 25. And B died in that time. And it was pouring. It was in Monterey, and it was in January, and there were just the forecast had said that the rains were just going to be like closing off roads. And it was kind of this like apocalyptic scene out there almost. Wow. And the rain was coming down really hard. And so I remember looking out at the weather and listening to the rain and closing the door and coming back into her room and sitting down, and just started talking to her about the weather. Aww. And then I leaned in, I had her hand, and this is how I was holding it when she died too. And I leaned in really close, and I was talking to her. And I remember just being in the flow and just talking almost like I didn't have to think about the words. Things were just coming. And it went from the weather to that night, and how nice it was to be with her, and how we had Karen. It was going to be okay. We would, as our family, have her. She could let go. Her angels were here. It was her time. What a wonderful life she's lived. We all loved her. And I just went on this. I was like a preacher. It was just coming out. And then I remember her breath slowed, and I just knew we were close. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And I think I texted Karen pretty close to like within a few minutes of her death. And she didn't see it. And I wrote, you might want to come back. And I put my phone down, and that's how I knew when she died, actually, because I saw the time on that, and I knew it was just a few minutes later. And then I remember sitting and leaning in with her and feeling this feeling come swooping through me. And all I can describe it as an energy coming down. And it's like it came around us and just like warm, like pure love. Like you read and hear about this and like stories of like, you know, near death or whatever, when people talk about like the light and how there's just like, I mean, it was like that. It was this most amazing feeling of like, oh, pure love, everything's okay, lightness, no grief, absolute like, ooh, this is the shit right here. This is it. And it was just, they came and I knew it was going on, and they just being, it was multiple energies, like spirits, angels, whatever they are, and just took her, lifted her. Everything went right through me, and the most amazing sensation that of course I've never felt in my life before or since. And the message of just knowing, being given to me of, you are loved. Thank you. We love you. You are loved. And you stay here. You stay here, which of course I'm like, yes, hell yes. You know, I wasn't like, wait. And then gone. And she had taken her last breath. And I knew in that moment, I'm like, oh my gosh, the angels whoever just came for her. They just took her. And I had walked in the conversation all the way up to that moment of like, your angels are here. It's okay to die. You can go. Like it was, and then I knew, and I was holding her hand, and it was very warm. And so I still sat there, and I was like, my human was like, I just need to watch and make sure there's not another breath. But I knew. Yeah. 100% I knew she had died. And then I released and sobbed, and it wasn't because of sorrow. It wasn't because of like, Bee's gone. She's 100. She wanted to die. It was because of the enormity of the experience. It was like how people will cry in church. The enormity of how I was touched by spirit was like incredible. And also the feeling of like, whoa, that was powerful. And whoa, everything is going to be okay because of that is what is waiting for us on the other side. What the hell do we have to be afraid of? Letting go and just the unknown. And like, you know, that's why it's like, love the people you're with, live the life you're in, and it's going to be complicated and you're not going to always feel pure joy. That'd be ridiculous. But know that this is it. And when you go, there's amazing, something indescribable on the other side. And I also know that they don't go far. I just feel it. And I've had many experiences to reinforce that for me. And they wait for us, and they come for us too when we go, you know? So it's like not a true loss in some ways. It's a transformation, you know? And you're never alone. You're never fully alone. Even in the darkest dark, you know? We're never alone. So that's what I got from that experience.
What a gift.
Yeah.
What a gift to be able to witness a beautiful death like that.
Yes. It was a total gift, especially coming on the heels of Chuck. Yes. And so maybe that's why for the next 1, 2, 3, so maybe it was 5. There might have been another one in there. They were easier.
Yeah.
Even my father, 10 months later. So my great aunt, who was my dad's aunt, you know, we don't have a giant family. She died within 5 or 6 hours of B dying on the other side. On the other side of the country. And I had not lost many people. And so that was fascinating to me. It's like the portal was open.
Interesting way to look at that.
Yeah.
The portal was open.
Oh, that was, I cannot believe that she died within a few hours of that.
Had she been sick?
She was 90 something, and she had Alzheimer's, and
so
everybody knew she was slowing. Oh, it was another one, not unexpected. And there was a lot of joy in the celebration of her life, and she had family with her, and they had a similar wonderful experience. I don't know if similar, but just, you know, they were grateful to have been with her, and her passing was not traumatic.
Yeah.
And then I guess the next one was my father in November. You know, he had been diagnosed with lung cancer in April, and then he had tried to, of course, otherwise healthy man who had smoked a lot of his life because he lost his dad when he was young, and He did all the things, and then it wasn't going to work, and we could see that. And I think that similarly, like that's even closer to me than Chad's mom, than Chad's grandma, Karen's mom. And so I was able to I just had a lot of peace. I had a lot of peace knowing like, oh, I know who's going to catch him. It's our people. Like, I know that. And plus he had been suffering in the last couple months of his life. Yeah. And he'd been holding on for us. And so we all came together and said, screw this. You tried, and let's not do this anymore. It's okay. And it was such a celebration that night when he, and in a way of
I want to
realizing
hear about that. So, okay. So you've got a family, you've got a mom and a sister.
Yeah. That was the four of us. Yeah.
That are all, love this man. And so did you guys have a discussion amongst you? Okay.
Yeah. And I had flown in
about that because this is like, I haven't had this experience, and so many people don't talk about these things. So it's really refreshing to get to hear about how to handle these things proactively. So, okay. So you know that he's suffering, he's tried things, and the three of you, your mom, your sister, and you have a conversation. And then what happened? How does that go?
So a couple weeks before my dad died, my sister called because she lived near them, and I was in Colorado and they were in North Carolina. So she saw them frequently, and she called me on her way back from visiting them, and she was crying, and she said, Melissa, I saw death in his face. I know he is dying. And I was driving back from having dropped one of my kids off at school, and I remember being like, okay, that's good to know.
That's where we're at.
Yes. And we knew that he wasn't recovering well from his last treatment, and so then she called me 2 days before he died. And
what kind of time frame between this? Is like days?
It's like a week and a half.
Okay.
And I was getting my kids ready to go to school, and the sun was just rising. And I remember that Shauna, my sister, called me, and she's like, Melissa, he's dying. And I was very calm. She was right there experiencing it, right? And I was, not that I wasn't sad, but I was like, okay, I'm coming. And I pulled up the computer and I found a direct flight within 2.5 hours. And I packed like in a movie when someone's like, I'm leaving. Like, I just grabbed things from my, socks and underwear and stuff from the toiletry. I had a huge suitcase.
You didn't know how long you were going to be there.
Yeah, I didn't know how long I was going to be there. It was winter. And I got that 9:40 flight direct to Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina. And so then I walked into his hotel room at 4:30 their time. So that would have been 2:30 my time. I mean, that happened really fast. And what Shauna had told me in the meantime is that he did have the option to try to do this or that. And they told him, no, Dad, it's okay. No, John, this is too much. And it would have been insane for him to keep trying things, like so painful. Not being able to breathe. I know. No. And so they had that conversation, and Shauna told me that. She prepped me, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I can be there. I can tell him the same thing.
Yes.
And so I got in, and I went right to his side, and we talked, and I remember he kind of walked up to the question of like, and I think, we think the treatments might just be in vain at this point, and like maybe too much. And I remember just being like, yes, Dad, I agree. It's okay. It's okay to not do these, and it's okay to die. And I remember that moment. I was the last person in our family to like say that. And I remember I'll never forget the look on his face and the relief in his eyes. And he turned away and he sighed and he got a little teary, but he like nodded and he went, okay, so you agree. And that that was all the gift he needed and all the permission. And we just had such a wonderful, joyful little experience that night. And, I remember he even ate a wonderful meal. Like he chowed. They brought his food and he ate. And my mom was going to stay there, and we set her up. My sister had brought her, because she lived closer, she brought her all kinds of pajamas and things and set up a cozy bed, and we were laughing about it and put the TV on at one point. I remember he was relaxed.
Wow.
And, there was nothing unspoken. I love you. And we were able to talk about again, like I said with B, when she was in her coma state, he said, I hope I've left mom in a place where she can be comfortable. And plus she had also lived, had a great job, and she brought stability too. And I said, yes, you have done an amazing job. And that hit him. I could see it. I said, and you have to know that we've got her. And that was the same kind of message I gave Karen, B, about Karen.
About Karen, yeah.
That we've got her as well. Like, don't you worry. Because like, first of all, you guys have set her up for success, and you have yourself, Dad. But also we have her.
Yes.
And it's Shauna and me and our husbands and our kids. She has 4 grandchildren. Like, don't you worry. Don't you worry. And so we went home that night, and Shauna and I were getting ready the next day to go into the hospital, and he was going to be moved into the VA, into like a hospice area. And that didn't need to happen. My mom texted at 7:15, he's going. And we were like, we knew what that meant. But we're like, but wait, do you think, then your brain gets in,
did she mean the VA or?
And then I was like, Shauna, we better go. We were getting dressed, and we were going faster and faster. And then 7:30, the text came through, he's gone. And I was like, I went into her bedroom because we were both getting ready, and I was in the guest room. And I remember we hugged and cried for a moment, but it wasn't like crazy cry. We were just like sob, like, and we both said, this is good. This is really good. This is going to be okay. And this is really good. And then we were like, let's get there to mom right now, you know? And we did, walked in, and we were all together, and he was still there, and we were able to sit around the bed, and we had a good amount of time before anyone came in, and they let us be. And it was very healing and wonderful. And yeah.
Oh, how special for your mom to have that time with him.
Yes. And she got to be there with him in his death. Yeah, very similar to what I experienced with B in some way.
I was going to ask, did she have a similar experience at the moment? I mean, I know you and your mom are close and talk about these things.
Yeah, and she is someone who could have, and she didn't talk about seeing or feeling or sensing any of that. But she was very happy to be with him in those moments.
I'm sure he was really happy.
Yeah.
Wow, it's so different than how so many people experience death.
Yeah.
So different. What do you think we need to do in society for people to have more experiences like you got to have with B, that your mom was able to have with your dad, that you and your sister were able to have with your dad? What do we need to do?
First baby step is just talking about it.
Yeah.
Talk about it. When like, it's just strange how people don't know how to talk about it. Like, it's okay, let's talk about how we don't know how to talk about it.
I guess that's the first step.
That's the first thing. And that's one thing. And I think also sharing stories is important, and people have, but making that available somehow. That's all I can say right now. And I think, I have another friend who is coming up on some loss with her husband is very ill, and he's dying, and they have 2 teenagers, not even preteens, they're preteens, young girls, and they have family around them, but people aren't talking about it much because he's really scared, so he's not talking about it. Plus he's lost his ability to speak, so that doesn't help. And I shared with them what I shared with you about my friend Michael showing me how to grieve. And I was really, and that night actually one of them just cried. It was fantastic. And I'm like, great. If I can even do that, right? But then also just talking with my good friend whose husband's dying, I was like, have you said to your kids, like, hey, if you ever want to, do you want to talk at any point about daddy? Like, we can talk. And she's like, I did a long time ago. You should do it again and again and again and again. Like, because with that age too, you can't force the moment.
Right.
You just have to let them know, like, and I think making it more natural, like, hey, let's talk about the fact that your dad's dying.
Yeah.
Like, they're not saying that, and so it's becoming like a thing, like, to not really talk about it. Not everybody's going to feel comfortable sitting there and like rubbing the hands of the person who's dying. Some people like will just need to not be there.
Yeah.
And that's okay. Not everybody needs to be right in there, but I think we need to normalize it. And it doesn't have to be like, I think the movies sometimes make it also like a lot of social media portrayal and all that of like death is like this big permanent void of nothing. And that's not what it is, And anyone who is religious will probably understand that's not the case. But I think sometimes the way our culture acts, it's like we act opposite of that. Like it is. the end. It's like, it's not really the end.
Yeah.
So death doesn't have to be all sorrow. You know, you need light to have dark.
Mm-hmm.
You need dark to have light is more of how I should have said it. And
Well, you need them both.
Yeah. And so you need that death to enjoy the light. And I think that's part of what I came out of the experience, especially with losing Chad's grandma B, realizing, oh my gosh, like even more so, it's like a near-death experience almost, right? Like, oh, wow, this world, this is amazing. I just watched someone walk right up to the end of 100 years, and that was beautiful. And I'm in it. I am in it. And this is it. This is it. And the joy is there. Just gotta look for it, right?
Thanks for joining me today on Unexpected Happiness. If anything we talked about felt familiar, be sure to check the notes for this episode. I've listed the resources mentioned in the description. And before you go, I want to leave you with a simple next step. Do you ever wonder why your life doesn't feel as good as it should? On paper, things are fine. But yet, inside, you might feel stressed, guilty, a little bit on edge. If that sounds familiar, I made something that can help. This isn't about fixing you, it's about understanding you. It's a short, free quiz that helps you spot the pattern that might be quietly draining your happiness, even when nothing is really wrong. You can take it now at unexpectedhappiness.net/quiz.